and also we know that she's truly community builder, amazing teacher, and she have been voluntarily doing a lot of social work and social services for the noble cause. So we are so happy to have you, ma'am, as well, Tejal, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
So today we are so privileged to have our TG sir as well as Jason sir to teach us once again about the depth of the mobile photography. We will have 6 sessions in total. So today is the first session. So you know, we all know Traveler G sir. In short, we say TG sir, our mentor, our Guruji, and he's also a well-known technical consultant and trainer. And he definitely enjoy sharing his experience even in local guides connect, because we see that, you know, he have very discipline in posting his experience about different places. So we are thankful to you, sir, and we are learning a lot about different places from you as well. And not forgetting our Jason sir. He's also an IT professional and a freelancer, 360-degree photographer, and currently sir is in Chennai. And also we know that he loved taking pictures and then, you know, about the camera. So we are so happy, and definitely we are looking forward to have you both, you know, in learning about this photography. So over to you, TG sir and Jason sir, please.
Yes. So, Jason, yes. See, I would like to start with an emphasis on this course. What is the aim of this course? So, and what is our approach? That means, you know, just get you something which you need not go on searching in the internet, or then at the end of the day, you have 100 things in front of you, but then you don't know what to take. So the concept of this course is to find out the essential points, practically important to the general mobile camera users, and serve it you in an easily understandable way. I'm sure you all understood that. That is, we have selected essential topics, not only in Aperture. Today is the first class, and that happens in the Aperture. Out of the 3 pillars, Aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, we have started with the Aperture, where we have selected essential topics only to explain. I will give you an example, and I would request you to kindly give us the feedback directly, or even through the recap. So kindly interact with us so that you know you will come to know. I will give you one example of the topic. Jason, next. Jason, next. Yes, this file is an example of Aperture. It's not even at corporate or professional level. I'm talking about even at the intermediate level. When you look at, you have so many topics in Aperture. Okay, what we are not going to deal are starting with the lens distortion, one heading, and subheadings are spherical aberration, vignetting, astigmatism, color fringing. So there is so many headings and subheadings which will confuse you only. So whereas what we have done is to select the key topics which you will use it on a day-to-day basis. For example, in camera and in Aperture, we have selected 2 specific topics which we will be using on day-to-day basis. What is that? The exposure control through Aperture and depth of field control through Aperture. So Aperture, basically, for the time being, we will approach through these 2 topics only. Next slide. That's it. Yes. So let's start with the Aperture, as we have started in the previous meeting. That Aperture is usually a controllable opening in a lens using a diagram to adjust the brightness, I would say exposure of an image that falls on the image sensor. I hope English is very clear. You know, there you may have little doubt. We will come to that. Don't worry about that. I'm sure end of the session you will definitely have good idea about Aperture. This Aperture is expressed as an F number. What is F? in the next slide we will see. F number or F stops, such as 1.2, 1.4 to 2.8, etc., and which has a larger or wider opening for a lower number and a narrow opening for a higher number. That is 1.4, you can see it is the pictorial representation shows it has a larger opening, and F22 has got a very narrow opening. This is, but you have to accept it. But then what is that? The next slide, Jason. So what is F number? Why F? Why not A? So the answer is F, or you can call it as fraction, or you can call it as focal length. F can be defined in two ways. One, take it as fraction, simple. F always is divided by something. So F bar 1.4, F bar 2.8. So F stop number is a fraction, but what is that fraction? Derived by dividing the focal length. Don't get into all these complications. You have to remember it as F for fraction. But theoretically, it is derived by dividing focal length with the diameter of the aperture. That means focal length in mm and diameter in square mm. That's it. So, but we need not worry about all these things, because we are not going to eat this in a different way. We are going to practically use it. However, there is an information for you. In typical mobiles, that means today what is available, commercially available mobiles, you have a range of F numbers, which is very important for when you buy a camera or a mobile camera, which is typically presently available are 1.6 to 2.4 F 1.6 to 2.4. And remember, this is very important when you buy a mobile. Try to get the lowest value if possible. 1.5 if it is available. Yes, it was available in Samsung in 9 plus or so, not 9 plus or so, but now the maximum available is 1.6 according to what I read as of today. That's it. And next slide. So typically the question, so many people have asked me why the aperture is the heart of the camera. Yes, that is, the answer is very simple. In a box camera, which is typically the base of any model camera, that is where we started with, there is a pinhole through which the object is reflecting on the sensor or on the screen. That's it. And the pinhole, once you close it, that's it. There is no image. There is no white balance, nothing else. It is as simple as that. So for a practical physical camera, the aperture is the primemost parameter, which is one out of the three pillars of photography. And we will get into the details shortly once again. And next slide. I thought of briefly explaining. The slides have been refined by our Jason sir only. So this is typically we are going to have a quick comparison of DSLR and mirrorless and its operation. So the written items, mirror, flash, these are all what you know. I need not explain. So I will start with the light rays. I'll consider this first as the DSLR camera. In DSLR camera, the light beam from the object enters through the different lenses and through the aperture and falls on a mirror which is kept at 45 degrees angle, which is actually a movable mirror which reflects the image through a prism and gets it to view on the viewfinder for you. This is basically all what we talked is regarding the viewfinder. How to view the object through a camera, we need a viewfinder. Hence, that is how the viewfinder works, which comes through the lenses and the aperture, and then aperture ring, it means, and then reflects on the mirror, gets into a prism, which gives the visual effect out, I mean, visual object through the viewfinder. Whereas in the mirrorless, what happens that there's no mirror at 45 degrees or prism. This mechanical items, removing this mechanical item makes the camera not only smaller, compact, but also sturdy, because of the mechanical movement parts are less. We means you have, what happens, the light directly comes, the shutter will be open always. Yes, even in normal cameras, when I say this, you will have doubt. TG, are you making a mistake? No, it's shutter is always open and the light enters. This I am talking about mirrorless cameras. Please remember, mirrorless cameras. The light enters and straight away the light enters through the open shutter to and enters the sensor, falls on the sensor, and the sensor then transmits it to the screen or to the storage device. Now, please understand there is the shutter operation. In the last class, we have physically shown the operation of the shutter. There are two shutters, etc. We explained in the previous class. We will, in case if it is needed, in a future class, in the shutter, we will once again take it in the next class, I mean to say. Okay, next. So the human eye has the sclera, which is the outside one, the white portion what we feel, and along with the eyelid we protect our eyes. That is the camera body. Okay, and the retina is the sensor. In the camera is the sensor and the retina in our eye, and iris along with pupil. Actually pupil is the aperture part and iris happens to be the diaphragm part, which controls the light and the amount of light which falls on the sensor. So this is an approximate or rough comparison of our eye, how it works and how the camera works. Yes, the object is ulta in our retina. Our brain works in such a way that right from the day one we have been seeing, so the brain makes it the other way and we see it rightly. Whereas in a camera, if the processor does, yes. So this is a quick video where you can see how actually the aperture opens. You can see the aperture opening. I'm now closing, now opening and opening, and this is how it opens, and now it closes back. This is done through a thumb wheel. Most of you know. Good evening to Steve. Most of you know. So this is actually happening through a control, a thumb control, which we will show you here. See, is the thumb wheel. The thumb wheel, and you can see the, yes, Jason is showing, that is the F changing from F22 and coming down to F8, F7.1, 2.8 and 1.8. This particular lens is a 1.8 lens, and that changes happening through the thumb wheel. This control is specially possible only in cameras, whereas in mobile this facility is not available. That is one of the main limitations, along with the zoom, optical zoom. These are the two parameters by which the today's mobile cameras are suffering, though there are technologies which have already been developed for attaching extra lens to camera, to the mobile camera. Next. Yeah, quickly touching, this is, I am not going to confuse you, but at least I want you to have a basic idea about what is a mobile camera working system. What is the mobile camera, how the mobile camera works. The starting is the lens. The lens is shown as a single layer, but for your information, yes, this is what is the lens. The lens is a set of glasses, and we call it as, the quality is known as P5, P7, the 7 pieces. So P7 lenses are, there will be 7 pieces of lenses. P5 means only 5. You can see this specification in some of the camera marketing techniques. Yes, back to the other slide. Yes. So with the sensor of, sorry, lens being this with this, every other screen, what I'm, sorry, the object I am going to explain is simply you have to understand that, it is to be taken with a pinch of salt, that it is not that this simple as that we are seeing, but it is much more complex. But then for simply understanding, the lens receives the light and passes through the micro lens. I will explain. The micro lens through micro lens, it falls on CFA, color filter array, CFA, and then from CFA it falls on the sensor, and the sensor senses the light and does so many things, and then passes along with the RAM. The processor works, and the processor then at the end will send the signal to the view, like the video, or to the mass storage system where the captured photo will be stored. Now, I am just explaining the micro lens. What is micro lens? Suppose you think about 4 megapixels on the horizontal line and 3 megapixels of micro lenses vertically. Horizontally 4 megapixels and vertically 3 megapixels of micro. Then the CFA, sorry, then that 12 megapixel gets each of the part of the object is passing through this micro lenses, and that micro lenses will focus the lights on the CFA, the color filter array. What is the color filter array doing? They will detect the light and convert it into red, green, and blue. Usually converts it into RGB, red, green, and blue. But remember, there is another set of technology which we don't want to get complicated. There are other technologies also there, but then this converted RGB signal is what sensor is processing. Sensor is getting and it is processing and then converts it into something which we call as the light up to here is analog. That means, it is a continuously varying item. Whereas after the processing of this processor, after the processor does its brain work, it becomes a digital signal, which can be stored in in a memory chip, or it can be viewed through the mobile screen. So I'm not complicating, but then you hope you got some idea about that. So the lens through micro lens falls or then gets filtered through the color array, which converts it into RGB colors, which will get into the sensor, and the sensor will send the details to the processor. Processor along with the RAM will process it and make it into digital signal and store it, or will be visibly shown through the screen. Okay, the next slide. Yes, my part of the job is getting over. If you have not already filled the membership form, then kindly do it, and I give the dice back to Sophie, who is the host of the meeting. And a little about who Sophie is an admin member of our team, and she was an active member in the WGS, that is weekly grooming session, and the IVM series of meetings. She was an active member, and thanks to Sophie for that, as well as for the hosting this meeting today. Thank you, Sophie and Jason.
Thank you very much, TG sir. I'm sure we have learned something new about the details of the mobile photography. And so as sir said, we just put in the chat box for the membership form. If anyone is new and yet to join, you can click on this link and fill up the form, and sir and the admin team will assist and then add you in the group. So now we are moving on to the next session. So once again, I welcome Jason sir. Sir, please, over to you.
Thank you, Sophie. Once again, thanks everyone for joining. So, as TG sir said, the two main aspects of the aperture is to control the brightness exposure in your photos and also the depth of field. So we'll just see what these mean and how it actually works in our photos as such. So we'll start with the brightness and exposure in the photo. So as we know, and the demo which we showed, that the opening in front of the in the lens in front of the sensor is where it becomes bigger or smaller. So it's common sense that when if the hole is bigger, the more the light will be allowed, and if it is smaller, the light will be lesser. So that is what is the controlling of the brightness and exposure means. So here, if you look at it, these photos have been taken in different aperture numbers. So this being the widest open aperture. So if you can look at it, it is very bright. This is very bright. And yeah, it is called in photography terms, we call this as overexposed. So as we actually reduce the aperture size, then it becomes darker and darker. And if it goes to f16, 11 or beyond, then it is underexposed. So it becomes very dark, and in both overexposed and in underexposed scenarios, the details in the picture will be missing. So the ideal way is that when you are controlling the aperture, you need to make sure that the brightness and the exposure of your subject is well lit, so that it is not too bright or not too dark, and you are able to see all the details properly. So just to give a sense, there is other two aspects through which you will be able to achieve the exposure or brightness, which is the shutter speed and ISO. We will be learning about that slightly in this small intro in this session, and more detailed in the coming sessions. But just for the record, all these photos have been clicked with the same shutter speed and ISO by only changing the aperture. So you will be able to find out like how the aperture is affecting the brightness and exposure of the picture. So moving on, the second aspect, which is called the depth of field. So the depth of field is nothing but actually if a picture is there. For example, in this one, there is a horse which is actually behind the horse is the tree, and behind the tree is a mountain. So if you can visualize a scenario like that, where the horse is nearer to the camera, then comes the tree, then the mountain. So in this scenario, when your aperture is open wide, it is like 2.8 is it will be the opening will be a little bigger actually. So when it is wide, what happens is in your scene, what is in focus will be a small range. So in this particular thing, when you focus on the horse, only horse will be in focus, the rest of it will not be in focus. So the depth of the field of view is only this much. In the entire screen, entire view that you are seeing, only the horse is sharp in the picture. All the others will be blurred out. The same way, with the same aperture, you can actually shift the focus, and you will be able to, that small area where it is in focus, it can be changed from one point to other, and whatever is in front or behind, that is the foreground and the background, will become blurred. So that kind of thing is possible when you are having a aperture which is wide. That is what is called the depth of field, where the depth of field is small. When you go to a smaller opening, then the depth of field increases. So here, where it is f16, we can see that all the three, even though they are all far from the camera, everything will be in focus. So if you want a small part of your image in focus, then you use a aperture number small but wide opening. If you want everything to be in focus, then you need to have an aperture number which is large, but actually the opening will be very small. So we'll just see a example of this. So this is how the setup is, which I have taken a photo, where there are 3 cars, one in the front, one in the middle, when it comes to distance from the camera, and one in the back. So we'll see what happened when we have a large, when the aperture hole is very small or a large aperture number, then you can see the entire scene is in focus. All the 3 cars you will be able to see clearly in this particular image. Now, if the aperture is made wider, that is what we are going to see now. Then the depth of field will become shallow or very thin. So in this picture, you can see only this much area of your entire scene is in focus. You can see the eyes of this gray color car, whereas the other 2 cars are totally blurred. You can't even make out whether it is a car or not. So, but with that same aperture setting, you can just change the focus from your one car to the other car. So here, if you see, I've just changed the focus to the middle car. Now only this is in focus. The foreground as well as the background is blurred out. And in the third one, that focus has shifted to the last car. Now you can see both these cars in front is blurred out. So what happens is, when the aperture is wider, you get a very thin area of your entire image in focus, but you have the ability to shift that area to whatever is the subject that you want to have. So that is possible with a thin shallow depth of field or thin depth of field with a wider aperture opening. Now, if the aperture opening is small, which is like f number of say 11, 16 or 22, what happens is the entire frame, whatever is there right from the camera, just before the camera till the very end, so the entire foreground, background and in the middle ground, everything will be very clear and everything will be in focus. So this type of setting generally we use for landscape photography, where we want to have the entire picture in focus. And the shallow depth of field mostly we do in the portrait type of photography. So again, we just discussed that the aperture control is not available in mobile, right? So without that, what mobile does is it's able to achieve the same by using software. And one more is in the newer mobiles, we have another secondary camera which is used for the depth sensor. So the depth sensor camera and the artificial intelligence software will try to find out what is actually your subject. It will intelligently find out the subject. It will try to find out the edge of the subject and make the other part blurry. So it creates the depth of field effect just by using the camera, that depth camera, as well as the software. But what happens is, since it is a software, you can see this particular photo was taken using a camera with the aperture setting. So you can make out the edges very clearly. Whereas this particular photo was taken using a mobile. So the mobile software is not able to really find out that this was also part of the subject. So this is the edges of this dress is also, if you see, it is blurred out instead of being as sharp as it is in a normal camera. So the mobile camera tries to achieve its best by to compensate for the aperture by using this methods. So just another example of how the bokeh effect happens using software. So here again, if you look at it, this swing, since the color of this chain and the background is same, it has blurred out this. Whereas here it is kind of, it is visible. So these kind of small errors are possible in the software. But if you are able to have a contrast in your image, then it is easier for the software to identify the edges, and it will make the blur effect more evident, and it becomes more easier. So again, here also you can see, unlike mobile, unlike a DSLR way, it's kind of a selfie. So from my hand onwards, if you look at it, it is little far from the camera, but still the entire edge is covered by the software and the rest of it is blurred out. So this is how the software works to create the bokeh effect. So when it comes to lens, what happens is, because the aperture is a circular opening, any small lights, or this is actually a decorative LEDs which are there. So when it goes out of focus, you get this beautiful circular bokeh effect in the lens when you are using the lens in a camera. But in the software, in mobiles, if you look at it, this is very difficult to achieve as such. It is mainly the creamy background which will be created rather than this kind of circular bokeh. One other thing here is like just to show that because of that opening only, that bokeh effect of the circular thing comes up. I have just kept a small this musical note kind of sheet in front of the camera, and I've taken the same shot. So if you look at it, all those bulbs are now turned out as if it is all musical notes, because that opening through which the light is coming is like this way. It changes the bokeh effect to that particular shape. So this is again, you can see, since the focus is over here, anything beyond that, it becomes out of focus. So this kind of bokeh you will be able to create using a lens, whereas the software, it will be a little difficult to achieve this kind of bokeh. So now coming to bokeh effect, like if you want to really enhance this in both, even in your mobile or in using your camera, some of the tips and tricks that you can follow is that when you go closer to your subject, or when you are using a DSLR or camera, you can, if it's a zoom lens, you can zoom in little bit closer, and then when you click the image, then the bokeh effect will be more visible actually. So here we have 3 example photos. So you can see the background image is not so blurry over here. When you go closer, it becomes more soft, and when you are very close to the subject, the entire background is very creamy. So this kind of bokeh effect you will be able to create when you move closer or zoom in. Another way to achieve this is, you need to make sure that your distance from your subject and the background is little far. So if the further the distance from your subject and the background, the bokeh will be more prominent. Same way, if you have anything in the foreground and your subject is just behind that, and if there is a good distance between your foreground and the subject, again you will be able to achieve bokeh for the foreground as well. So both ways, foreground or background, make sure that you have enough space between the subject and your foreground background, then you will be able to achieve more bokeh. When it comes to software, as we just mentioned, you can, if you have a contrast in your subject and the background, it will be very easy for your software to find out the edges and blur out the background. So again, this is all for the closer or zoomed in way, and the distance also is applicable for the mobile as well, because that depth sensor which we were saying, right, there is another camera which is there to sense the depth of it. So there again, like it's like your two eyes you have to see the 3D image. So if you just keep your finger and see one eyes and you shift to the other eyes, you can see the finger jumping, right? So that, if you see, if it is closer, it is more prominent, and if you go further, it is the distance will be small. The same way, when you are closer to the subject, it will be easier for your mobile to identify what is the 3D effect in your picture and find out the edges for blurring.
This is the end of our session, am I right, Jason? Yes, next session is on shutter speed.
Yes, sir.
The date of the meetup will be announced little later, because there are the 15th happens to be our National Independence Day, and 22nd happens to be Raksha Bandhan. So these two Sundays are not possible. So we will announce it shortly.